You've made appearances at 4 of David Horowitz's Freedom Center events. Again, 4 separate times, 4 speeches. Among some of Mr. Horowitz's statements, quoting here, "This country's only serious race war is against whites."
He had not even made those statements then.
Yes, he had, sir. The first statement was made many years ago.
I mean, how the hell am I supposed to know every single statement somebody makes?
Mr. Gillum, I'll give you a chance to respond now.
Well, let me first say, my grandmother used to say, a hit dog will holler. And it hollered through this room. Now, I'm not calling Mr. DeSantis a racist. I'm simply saying the racists believe he's a racist.
If you're not following the Florida governor's race, you should be. That was one of the more heated exchanges from the final debate for Florida governor between former Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis and Tallahassee's Democratic Mayor Andrew Gillum, where the issue of race was a big part of last night's meetup. The Miami Herald described it as a bare-knuckle brawl and writes, "Cool was lost. The moderator was not spared any venom, and in between daggers and accusations, when policy was actually discussed, 2 candidates firmly on the opposite ends of the political spectrum left little for the voters in the middle to chew on. With less than 2 weeks to go, polls still show Gillum with the lead over his opponent. The latest Real Clear Politics average has him 4.5 points ahead of DeSantis. Joyce, Steve, and the table are here. What do you make of this race?
You know, this has been a Republican state at that level for so long.
I worked for the past Republican government.
You did, and it's
become
strange to see
very
it
red
changing.
and presidential.
It really has. But you know what? Look, I think that Ron DeSantis made a tactical choice in the primary to dive headlong into the Trump wing of the party and court them, and he is paying the price. It used to be that if you were a Republican in the primary, it was a problem of tacking too hard right on issues, and now it's a problem of tacking and becoming too Trumpy, and he became too Trumpy.
Let's illustrate your point. Here's one of DeSantis's ads.
Everyone knows my husband, Ron DeSantis, is endorsed by President Trump, but he's also an amazing dad. Ron loves playing with the kids.
Build the wall.
He reads stories.
Then Mr. Trump said, "You're fired." I love that part.
He's teaching Madison to talk.
Make America great again.
People say Ron's all Trump, but he is so much more.
Big league. So good.
I just thought you should know.
Ron DeSantis for governor.
Listen, this ad is both the best and worst ad of the cycle. It probably gave him the nomination, but now it looks silly. And it
really
probably will
does.
cost him the general.
It looks like a parody. I mean, just to deconstruct it for 1 second, she says, "You know that Donald Trump has endorsed my husband, but he's a good father." In other words, it's saying he's demonized by Donald Trump, but he has some saving graces. He's actually nice to his children. I mean, that's kind of amazing that that's the ad.
And that's where we are. Corinne Jean-Pierre is joining the conversation. She's a senior advisor to MoveOn.org, and you've been on the ground around the country. This race seems like one that is, I don't want to jinx anything, but trending in the Democrats' favor. Talk about what you see going on in what we've been describing as a pretty red state.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you know, you guys, I'm sure, talked about Donald Trump won the state by 1 or 2 percentage points. It's a very red state. It's the big battleground states in the in the presidential election. I think what's happening is in this particular election is DeSantis has literally embraced the worst parts of Donald Trump's political playbook. And by doing that, you have white nationalists. He sent a loud and clear message to white nationalists who are coming out and supporting him. I'm sure you guys talked about the robocalls that have happened after he kicked off his general election campaign with a racial slur. And so essentially what's happening, though, Nicole, is they're running a very, very different campaign. You have, and closing arguments are, you have DeSantis saying, you know, fear-mongering, doing fear-mongering, politics of fear, and that's what he's going with. And you have Andrew Gillum, if elected, would be the first African-American governor of Florida running in an inspiring campaign, really authentic, and talking about the issues that people care about. I mean, young people, you talk to young people in the state who are in college and in university coming out to support him, and they will tell you exactly why they support Andrew Gillum. And they are energized and totally all in for him. And so it's very 2 different campaigns. And we're talking about the midterms where Democrats, the base, does not come out on our side. And so Andrew Gillum has been able to do that because he is authentic and inspiring.
Karen, the one one other thing he's doing that really no one has done in the Trump era is he's taking the question of race that Trump has weaponized through dog whistles, and really after Charlottesville, not so much dog whistles, but megaphones. And he's turned that dynamic around to say in his debate last night, I'm not calling you a racist, but the racists think you're on their side. David Duke, after Donald Trump announced that he's going to make the word nationalist great again, David Duke said Trump embraces nationalism in a massive jam-packed 99.9% white venue in Houston. Zio journalists asked him if this is white nationalism. Of course, fundamentally, it is, as there is no ethnic or racial group in America more nationalist than white Americans. So what's the problem? I mean, this is the conversation about race from the point of view of the racists. And Gillum just went there and didn't let this sort of undercurrent of you can't even call it an undercurrent, this current of racism turn the tide in that state.
Nicole, that's exactly right. He was skillful at it. Normally, Democrats stay away from talking about racism. They don't deal with it. They run away from it. And what he did is he was able to talk about racism and well, he did it without calling his candidate, his opponent, a racist, which is really amazing. And what ended up happening is he made it go viral. He made that moment go viral, which is incredibly difficult to do in a debate. And we're not talking about anything else, but we're talking about how skillful Andrew Gillum was able to do that, to pull that out in a way that was incredibly smart.
Steve Schmidt, the question of race and Trumpism, nothing surprises me about the lack of courage from Republicans, but there are a handful of Republicans about whom I'm still disappointed that they don't speak out about Donald Trump's flagrant racism. I get why they go along with some of the hardline immigration policies. I get that has torn I don't agree with it, but that's torn the Republican Party apart since when you and I were still practicing Republicans. But I don't get the silence over the flagrant, blatant, constant racism, the embrace from David Duke. I have no explanation for that. Is this race, is this state finally turning that dynamic around?
Well, it speaks to the corruption of the conservative movement in the Republican Party. The reality is that when Donald Trump declares himself a nationalist, the nationalists understand exactly what he means. And by the way, let's stop calling them white nationalists and call them by their name, which are neo-Nazis and Klansmen. But what Trump has done with regard to nationalists, quote unquote, is send a signal that, well, we may not bring you home to Thanksgiving dinner and put you in the front row at the rallies, but you're an important and vital part of our coalition. And after Trump said he was a nationalist, if you go to the neo-Nazi website, the Daily Stormer, you see celebration that they have achieved a goal, that they have been given a seat at the table, that their views are held as somewhere in the mainstream, and that they are part of a coalition that is led by Donald Trump. And when you look at that DeSantis ad, remember two things. The first thing he says in the election is, it's not time to monkey around. He uses the word monkey, which of course is deliberately racist against an African-American opponent. But think about the small c corruption of the Republican Party. Florida is a state with 21 million people. It has very nearly a $1 trillion economy. And DeSantis's argument to put him in charge of that as the chief executive is that he is a faithful, obedient drone to the maximum leader, Donald Trump. What an absurdity. What a stupid proposition. And so what DeSantis has done is he's played footsie openly with all of these white nationalists, with the most base elements of the Trump coalition, and Florida voters are rejecting it, which is good.
Joyce, can you weigh in both on this race, the Gillum-DeSantis race in Florida, and also just, in your life, in your role as part of the law enforcement community, just speak to the combustion of the President of the United States declaring and announcing that he's a nationalist, not 48 hours later, this unsuccessful, massive assassination attempt on Democratic Party leadership.
One issue that prosecutors in the South have to confront on an ongoing basis, something that I had to deal with in Alabama, are these occasions where law enforcement, usually inadvertently, finds that on a police force or in a sheriff's office, there are some nationalists, some white supremacists who have managed to make it past their screening and become police officers, become law enforcement. It rips communities apart when this happens. Law enforcement and our political leadership are meant to serve all of us. They're not meant to serve only the people who support them, who vote for them, who elect them. Once they're in office, they're there for all of us. So to have a governor in a southern state like Florida, in Ron DeSantis, who explicitly goes out and talks about supporting the Trump nationalist agenda will not help to move us forward. It will continue to inflame passions, and people like DeSantis, who have aligned themselves with Trump, now need to distance themselves from his rhetoric and say that they do not support the use of violence in support of political aims. It's something that should never have to be said in American society, but suddenly we're in a point in time where people who are part of the Trump movement need to say that they don't support violence.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.